Okay, let's dive into this. When most of us hear the name Judy Garland, it's incredibly easy to just picture the little girl in the gingham dress, right? Or maybe we instantly jump to those headlines of a tragic, embattled Hollywood star. But there is just so much more to her story than that simple trope. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to look way past the tragedy and really examine the sheer, unadulterated talent and the monumental cultural resonance of one of the 20th century's absolute greatest performers. To really wrap our heads around her legacy, we're going to break her life down into 4 distinct pillars. We'll start with her grueling years inside the Hollywood machine, then we'll explore her musical genius as the voice of a century, take a look at the profound ironies of life imitating art, and finally, look beyond the rainbow to her enduring status as a cultural icon.
All right, Section 1, the Hollywood Machine. Long before she was a household name, she was Frances Ethel Gum, born in 1922 into a family of vaudeville performers. And her entry into show business wasn't just early, it was absolute.
Let's move to her timeline and see how this builds because it is truly staggering. Imagine this, making your stage debut singing Jingle Bells when you're just 2 years old. By 1935, a single audition for MGM landed her a contract. Just 4 years later, at barely 16, her iconic role in The Wizard of Oz launched her into global megastardom and won her an Academy Juvenile Award. Yet despite literally being a box office goldmine for 15 solid years, MGM abruptly fired her in 1950.
So, what happened? Well, behind that glittering Hollywood image, the reality of the studio system was harsh, and it was incredibly manipulative. Even though she was one of MGM's most bankable stars, Garland was deeply insecure. And that was a feeling actively perpetuated by studio executives, particularly Louis B. Mayer. He would regularly insult her physical appearance and her weight, basically to demoralize and control her. To cope with the insanely strenuous shooting schedules of those backyard musicals she filmed with Mickey Rooney, Garland claimed the studio actually supplied her with amphetamines and barbiturates. And that, tragically, marked the genesis of her lifelong addiction.
The personal cost of this fame was devastating. During The Wizard of Oz, the production was reportedly just rife with sleep and food deprivation. And as she grew older, the control only tightened. Executives reportedly strong-armed her into terminating pregnancies just to protect their profit margins. Years of this total exhaustion, fueled by substance abuse, finally culminated in a massive nervous breakdown on the set of The Pirate in 1947, which eventually led the very machine that built her to just discard her in 1950.
Section 2. The Voice of a Century. When Hollywood discarded her, it was actually her live concert career that saved her. Without the constant mediation of film cameras or studio executives breathing down her neck, her true musical genius was finally unleashed on stage.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how her signature songs map out her entire evolution as an artist. She possessed this incredibly powerful, deep contra-alto voice that could literally fill the massive London Palladium without a microphone. Yet in the very next breath, she could drop down to a whisper that felt so incredibly intimate. But what really set her apart was her honesty. She never ornamented a song just to show off. Every single phrase served the lyric, whether she was belting out the demanding up-tempo trolley song or pouring her heart into her personal favorite, The Man That Got Away.
And her audience responded to this raw talent in historic numbers. Just think about this number for a second. 95. That is how many weeks her legendary 1961 double album, Judy at Carnegie Hall, stayed on the Billboard chart. 95 weeks. That single concert is constantly described as the greatest evening in American popular music history. It won 5 Grammy Awards and actually made her the very first woman to ever win Album of the Year.
The theater critic Kenneth Tynan perfectly captured the absolute magic of these live performances. He wrote, "When Judy Garland sings, and she always sings as though her life depended on it, she can stop a show cold, stop time cold, and make you feel that nothing before or after will quite equal what you are hearing now." It was that total, unheld-back emotional commitment that made her unforgettable.
Section 3. Life Imitating Art. Garland's return to Hollywood in the 1950s brings us to one of the most fascinating and frankly poignant chapters of her career, marked by her massive widescreen comeback. And this brilliantly illustrates the deep tragic irony of this comeback. In 1954, she starred in A Star is Born. Now, if you know the film, it follows a rising star who is married to a self-destructive alcoholic whose addiction ultimately leads to tragedy. But behind the scenes, Garland was the one fighting those exact same demons. While James Mason played the addict on screen, Garland was battling her own lifelong addiction and crippling exhaustion in reality. It was so bad it caused massive delays and budget overruns for the studio. The film itself actually almost acknowledges this terrible dissonance. There's this one specific scene called Lost That Long Face, which serves as a perfect metaphor for her entire career. In the movie, Garland's character is in her dressing room just weeping, deeply worried over her sinking husband. It's a heavy, sorrowful moment. But the very instant she steps onto the soundstage, this bright, jaunty music kicks in, and she bursts into an absurdly happy, beaming musical number. It's this stark, vivid reminder of the artifice of Hollywood make-believe and the immense pain she had to learn to just smile through.
Her final years, unfortunately, were incredibly chaotic. Despite getting great critical acclaim, her television variety show was canceled after just one season in 1964. By 1967, she was fired from the film Valley of the Dolls a mere week into filming. Her finances were completely in ruin, with tax liens literally forcing the sale of her home, and ultimately, she tragically died of an accidental barbiturate overdose in London in 1969. She was only 47 years old. But, and we cannot stress this enough, despite all of this, Garland fiercely rejected being labeled a tragic figure. She always viewed herself as a fighter.
Section 4. Beyond the Rainbow. Because to fully grasp her story, we absolutely have to look at her monumental cultural resonance as an LGBTQ+ icon. It's this fascinating sociological phenomenon that has been documented and studied for decades.
Publications like The Advocate have gone so far as to call Garland the Elvis of homosexuals. So why is that? Well, the source material points to a few different theories for this deep connection. Back in 1967, Time magazine consulted psychiatrists who suggested that gay men identified with her because she had survived so many problems. She was, quote, beaten up by life. Writer William Goldman noted that homosexuals at the time were a highly persecuted group who understood suffering. So when they looked at Garland's heavily publicized struggles with pills, weight, and the brutal studio machine, they saw a shared resilience. To them, she was a survivor.
Another major factor here is her camp appeal. Gay film scholar Richard Dyer defines camp as a way of handling dominant culture through irony, exaggeration, and theatricalization. Garland basically became a legendary camp figure because her gestures were so distinct and imitable, which made them perfect for drag acts. Her later performance style was wonderfully over the top, taking the very serious stuff of life and transforming it into pure theatrical survival.
Then, of course, there is the undeniable connection to The Wizard of Oz. The famous film director John Waters actually summed up his childhood experience watching the movie perfectly. He said he never understood why Dorothy wanted to go back to a dreary black-and-white farm in Kansas when she could live with magic shoes, winged monkeys, and gay lions. The film perfectly mirrored this desire to escape the limitations of a small-town life for a colorful, vibrant, and welcoming world. So the crucial point is that this on-screen acceptance actually created a real-world cultural shorthand. The phrase, friend of Dorothy, became a secret mid-20th century code phrase used by gay men to safely identify one another. In the film, Dorothy immediately accepts anyone who is different, no questions asked. The Cowardly Lion, for instance, actually identifies himself through song as a sissy, which was widely seen by audiences as a coded example of Garland meeting and openly accepting a gay man.
Historical timelines also point to this incredible, almost eerie synchronization. Judy Garland's highly emotional funeral took place in New York on June 27, 1969, and it was attended by over 20,000 mourning fans. Just hours later, in the early morning of June 28, the Stonewall riots began, which became the flashpoint of the modern gay liberation movement. Now, while historical opinions definitely vary on how direct the link is, witnesses like bar patron Sylvia Rivera noted that Garland fans had actually come to the Stonewall Inn straight from the funeral to mourn, and that Garland's death absolutely contributed to the intensely overwrought emotions of that specific historic night. And how did Garland feel about all this? She welcomed this devoted audience entirely. There's this amazing story from a 1965 press conference where a reporter asked her how she felt about having such a large gay following. She didn't skip a beat. She delivered this legendary, fiery response. "I couldn't care less. I sing to people." It was just a brilliant testament to her universal, uncompromising warmth and acceptance.
Which leaves us with this final thought. How does an artist who was so thoroughly battered by the Hollywood machine manage to leave behind a legacy of such unadulterated joy and acceptance? Well, I think it's because, through sheer tenacity, Judy Garland took her deepest, darkest insecurities and transformed them into vocal magic that literally still stops audiences cold today. I highly encourage you to go listen to that Carnegie Hall album and hear that raw power for yourself. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.